Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine. This video show and podcast is produced by CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, which is an IDG company. Today's episode is sponsored by Data Extreme, which develops sales order management solutions on emerging technologies for SAP users. Its flagship platform simplifies and streamlines complex sales order processes, which helps your company deliver exceptional customer experiences. For more information, visit them online at dataextreme.com. Our show is coming to you today live both on LinkedIn and CIO's channel on YouTube. So we invite our viewers to take part in the conversation today with questions of your own. Our editors are watching both of the chat streams on LinkedIn and YouTube, and they are at the ready to pass your questions along to my guest today, who I'm very pleased to say is Marty Menard. He is the CIO of Pacific Coast Companies. Pacific Coast is a privately held company based in Rancho Cordova, California. Its business has been running for more than 70 years, and it is a family of companies that specializes in providing a wide range of facility services, construction materials, supplies, and fittings. The company employs more than 4,000 people and has over 100 sites. Marty joined Pacific Coast as CIO 7 years ago, and he brought with him more than 30 years of cross-industry executive leadership experience from his senior roles in IT, business operations, manufacturing, and finance. Before his current role at Pac Coast, he served as the CIO and executive VP of Rabobank. And then before that, he spent several years with Hewlett-Packard, most recently as VP of Finance and Administration, and before that, 24 years at Intel, where his last position was Group CIO for the IT organization. Marty, welcome. It's so good to have you here today.
Mary Fran, thanks for having me. That was a great introduction. My gosh.
Oh, I know. I find my CIOs are always, they're so impressed with their own backgrounds. You never stop to think, do you, about
really
all the things you've accomplished? Because when I was first looking at your bio and I saw it was 30 plus years of industry experience, I thought, well, he still looks like he's in his 40s. This can't be true. This can't be true.
So kind.
Let's start out with some perspective on your industry and the impact these last couple disruptive years have had on the construction and services business and the customers that you all are serving.
Well, it's really been an interesting couple of years. In 2020, March of 2020, COVID hit, although it may have been around part of that. And I think our company really was confused about what was going to happen. We sent all of our employees home. Many of our employees that work in our manufacturing sites, though, were considered necessary employees. So manufacturing kept working. And we really anticipated a significant slowdown in our business. And actually, the direct opposite happened. The last time the construction industry really had a major slowdown was 2008. And it really, during the financial crisis, and really slowed things down. And since then, it's just been in recovery mode. I think that was our lowest point prior to 2007. And then around 2016, we were back above previous year's level. So we've rebounded. And every year since then has been a new record for us in terms of revenue, margin, et cetera. And we've been growing at that same time. So while COVID appeared to be a killer for our industry, it was actually the opposite. The demand for new homes, the demand for more construction, I think the infrastructure plan that the government put in place is going to continue that as well. So it's really been surprising.
It's so much fun, isn't it, to be working for a company where it's just growth, growth, growth. And it sounds like from our previous conversations about this that the the family that owns the company got a lot more interested in upgrading the whole IT operation. So tell us about that. I know that this is your first venture working for a family-owned company, and you've been at very big public companies, Intel and HP and all that. And so it's a very different environment with very different needs. So what have you been accomplishing over these last 7 years?
Well, there's a tale of between 2008 and then 2017 and then 2017 till today. So in 2008, when the economy went bad, the CIO and a number of principals left the company, really decimated the organization, but they were trying to service both the company and the industry, and that didn't really work. And so between 2008 and 2017, they went through three kind of CIO leaders. The investment went down because they were worried about the total spending. We went well below 1% of revenue being spent on IT. And they just had a hard time attracting people because it just wasn't viable. Right. And so by the time I arrived in 2017, the relationship between the subsidiary presidents, we have 5 of them, and the IT team was terrible. The reliability was terrible. We didn't know how to spell cyber. The risk assessment just hadn't been done. And so that beginning process of coming to the company was, for me, starting as, do you want to invest? What is it you want to become? Where do you want to go? Right. And so we've more than doubled our investment in IT in the 7 years that I've been here. I think today we're about 1.7% of revenue spent on IT. We've improved the reliability of the environment, right? So table stakes for IT is really making sure things run smoothly. And if they do, you can go on and do other things. And if not, you have to make it reliable. When I started, we were putting a new phone system in place. And I got a phone call from one of the presidents every week complaining about the reliability and the pace with which we were moving. I like to talk about the valley of death. The valley of death is the time in between when you start an implementation and when you finish. And the longer that is, the more painful it is, right? You want that to be as short as possible. So those first couple of years working with the family was, hey, we're committed. We want to grow. We want to expand. And we need help from a technology perspective. And so we've totally recast the leadership team. Everybody that's working for me today is new in the last 4 years. Okay. The leaders below them are all new in the last 4 years. The average tenure of our employees today is around 4 years. And I've got 2 employees that are 30 and 35 years mixed in there as well. So you can tell that there's a bunch of new folks. So kind of a long answer, but working for a family business is very different. The overhead and structure and requirements from a public company are much greater, certainly much less than a financial institution. And a lot of it comes down to trust, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But it's great working for a family-run company. I'd encourage anybody out there that's a CIO and they're working for a public company, go try working for a family company. I think it's much different.
Well, and I've interviewed many CIOs over the years who've done that, have gone from either PE-based companies or public companies to a private one. And the thing that seems to amaze them the most is how streamlined the decision chain is. I had one CIO tell me about going in a big entertainment company that builds like venues, like stadiums. And he went in and, proposed various things to the CEO, the owner that runs it. And the guy said, that sounds great. Go do it. And he said, oh, okay, well, what do you need next? Do we do a business plan and do we have a committee? And he was like, no, just go do it. And that must feel so different, having your hands on the wheel that way. I guess that's why you're still there 7 years later, right?
That is exactly my experience as well. And, I joked when I came in that the average life of a CIO in a role is usually 3 years. 3 years came and they're like, you're still here. Like, well, why wouldn't I be? This is fun. It's enjoyable, right? We're getting stuff done. It matters. The trust level is back between the partners. Yeah. And it's a very enjoyable very enjoyable role.
Let's take a little sidebar and talk about those trust issues. What sort of advice do you have for other CIOs and IT execs who might be listening about how you went about building that trust level? And was it different, or did you do something differently from how you had built trust before?
Really, really good question. So, when things are not reliable,
Oh,
you're getting phone calls,
yeah.
you know that there's no trust, right? When I was at Intel and at HP, I used to say, hey, most business people are from the state of Missouri. You have to show me you're worth something before I'll trust you.
Yes.
And I grew up in Detroit, and I always believed that you had my trust first, and it was yours to lose. And so coming into situations, it felt similar to working at Intel and HP in regards to I have to prove myself first.
Sure.
And it was obvious what I had to prove, right? And so you get reliability working, and you start focusing on risk because everybody knows. I mean, anybody that watches TV, watches 60 Minutes, reads a book, knows about ransomware and hacking and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so everybody's an IT expert then.
Yes.
And so getting that trust was really relatively easy because I knew what I had to go do. We just had to get some things fixed. And so there had been a number of technology-based decisions, and the organization operated in such a way that technology led versus business leads. And so as soon as I came in, I spent time with all the business leaders trying to understand, where are you going? What are you trying to do? What are your problems? And that open communication is so important. And too often, I think technology people lead with, well, this is the greatest SD-WAN solution. This is the greatest cyber solution. This is the greatest whatever. And it really needs to start with, the business problem or opportunity we're trying to take advantage of, and then fitting the technology to that.
Okay, that totally makes sense. One of the things that we'd also talked about was that there's a lot of unique complexities to the various niches that Pacific Coast is involved in. You're not just a simple building trades supply company, and you don't just do manufacturing. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that makes your job as the CIO, that's a lot more balls to juggle in the air, I would imagine, because you said 5 subsidiaries. So that's a lot of presidents of different subsidiaries that you have to work with.
So I work for the family member, third generation, who runs the companies overall.
Yeah.
And along with the chief legal officer and the chief operating officer, the 3 of us report to him. And so we provide these central shared services to the other 5 subsidiaries. So I have really 6 bosses, but one that carries the family name.
Yeah.
So 2 of our businesses are in manufacturing. Between them, they have 20 different manufacturing plants across the Western United States. We have companies that run from the Canadian border down to Arizona, and then from Hawaii to Texas. And that's kind of the footprint that we sit in. So those 20 manufacturing facilities are all across the United States, and no 2 are exactly the same. They're all slightly different, and I can go into that if you want to. In addition to that, we have a distribution business that has 55 locations across those 14 sites, 14 states. And there's a growth plan there. Each of the companies grows differently. Those facilities sell around 6,000 products to contractors and subcontractors in their particular area or region. And then we do deliveries for them as part of it. And 2 of the deliveries for shingles, composite shingles, and then drywall, wallboard, actually are placed on the roof or inside of buildings so that people don't have to carry things up any longer. It's actually put in place where it's needed. So imagine a 4-story building and those elevators that have to put all that stuff. We actually have a boom that puts it inside the building for them.
Cool.
Then we have a specialty contracting business that does things for contractors, subcontractors, commercial as well as consumers. So we'll get hired by a KB Homes or a Menard Homes or something like that to put on 100 roofs or 50 fireplaces or 75 garage doors in a neighborhood. We've been hired by Google and Apple to work on their campuses for waterproofing and weatherproofing.
Okay.
And so fairly large business and very, very different than the other two.
Yeah.
And then we have a logistics group that also does hauling of our products for us as well as for other companies as well. And then they also have a freight forwarding business where companies will deposit their product into our yards. We'll store them until they need them, and then somebody will come and pick them up, and then we move them to either a train or a truck for movement. And so they all have different needs, and they all think that I care about one of the others more than them. It's been pretty interesting having that conversation with people.
I'll bet. Well, and you'd mentioned also when we talked, I always tend to ask about the digital business development, like what has happened with, XYZ company in terms of growing in digital services. How relevant is that for you at Pacific Coast? Do you have some of your subsidiaries that are much more advanced in that, or is there an overall digital strategy that I should be asking you about?
So I think one of the things that's unique about a family business as compared to a corporation that's public is that each of the businesses has a level of autonomy to make investments as they see. They each have their own board of directors, they each have their own financial officer, and they each have their own president. And so that uniqueness then says some people move faster than others. So one of the manufacturing groups today would be my number one customer, I would say. It's called Pabco. They do roofing, paper, and then gypsum board.
Yeah.
They have one of the most efficient wallboard plants in the United States in the Vegas desert. If you ever fly into Vegas, you see a gigantic solar array in a giant mine. That's us sitting out there in the desert. You can wave as you go by.
I definitely will.
They are their leader has a clear vision of what he's trying to accomplish in terms of remaining relevant with his customers. And so we're starting with some capabilities that give them more awareness about shipments that we do, because there are hundreds of trucks and rail cars that leave our mine and our plant in Vegas every single day. And depending on whether it's a direct ship to a distributor or a direct ship to a site, when it gets there, somebody has to unload it. And so one of the problems has been people show up and the truck hasn't arrived yet. Well, we put in some capabilities that now tell the customer, hey, at 3:00 on Tuesday, the order is going to be there. They can have a crew there to unload it and take care of business.
Yeah.
And then he also wants to have provide more capabilities to his customers so that they understand pricing, inventory, specials, rebates, all the rest of those things that create stickiness with those distributors who are very large, much larger than our company, as a matter of fact. Right. And so they're probably the leader. And then one of the other manufacturing groups is less interested. They're spending more of their time focused on robotics inside the factory. I think one thing that's common, Mary Fran, across all the businesses is trying to find labor. And that really became more evident during COVID. And it's been harder and harder whether people, first of all, it's a dirty, dusty, hot, cold, miserable environment that our plants are in.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to get people to want to do those jobs. And so they're looking at robotics and automation that will allow them to replace jobs and move people into more value-added positions.
Yeah. It sounds like it's really fun for you because you have a CIO job for essentially these 5 subsidiaries. It's a lot of variety, isn't it? I mean, there's probably no one size fits all in anything that you're dealing with.
Each of the, I think one of the things that's common across all of them today is the need for a greater level of mobility in terms of what people do and how they do it. So their ability to check in on a job and see where things are at, to make sure that they're going to the right location, to make sure that we're informing customers of when we're going to arrive. There's a whole focus right now for us across all the subsidiaries around mobility. That'd be the one thing that's common. After that, very, very different needs and demands. The manufacturing guys are putting in all this robotics and technology, and they need more networking capabilities, and they've got more servers and things on the edge, right? Because a lot of these applications that are being run are now, we used to take all that stuff out. Now we're putting it all back in.
Oh, interesting.
And when you do that, then, we need to have OT people sitting
Mm-hmm.
inside the factory. And one of the things we're wrestling with is, do those OT people, operational technology, report to the factories, or do they report to IT? Or how do we share that responsibility?
And they've
So we're
often
going,
been very separate in the past. I remember at CIO magazine and before that at Computer World about doing stories about the communication and collaboration difficulties between the OT folks, which tended to be more, as you say, factory based, and they were more like engineers on site, and they felt very distant often from enterprise or corporate IT. Mm-hmm.
when I worked at Intel, we had a manufacturing organization that supported Intel's factories, and the people that worked in the OT environment actually reported into IT, but they were on site. And there was, I think, good collaboration that way. As soon as you take a person, the farther away you get from the mothership, the less relationship you have with what's actually going on. And so I think it's important for those people to actually at least have a matrix relationship back to IT and the CIO. So it's clear what, kind of job one is, because when somebody's out in the middle of the Vegas desert and somebody says, hey, machine X is down, I need you to come over and help me, everybody's going to drop what they're doing and make sure that that happens because they have to keep production running.
Yeah. The it's speaking of the kind of common problems, you get out in the industry a good bit. You go to some of the big provider and vendor shows and you meet with other CIOs and CTOs. What are the common problems you come across in the building and construction trades industry that others are tackling today?
Boy, that's a tough question to answer. So that, if you think about us, we're a $1 to $2 billion company. We're very diversified in terms of what we do. And there are companies that are in distribution that are $8 to $10 to $12 billion and just distribution.
Right.
And so it's hard to say any one thing is common. I think everybody's wrestling with certainly cyber, right? Nobody wants to be that guy that has guy or gal that has been ransomwared and their systems get shut down and they can't do email and et cetera. I think everybody is struggling with what does digital transformation mean to them.
Yeah.
And kind of a sub element under that is data and master data. And one of the things I've been talking about to many people, especially now due to AI, is where is our data? How clean is it? Who's managing it? Because as soon as you start exposing it to your customers, which is what people want to do, it has to be right. It's one thing for us to make a delivery and send 5/8 inch wallboard instead of 1/2 inch wallboard, and we can go, oh, we're just a bunch of dumbasses, and we screwed up, and then we send the right product, but we've lost margin because we're sending something twice. But as soon as somebody sees that online and shows up, it becomes a different story because we're all used to having the Amazon experience. Right?
I know.
And so that master data, what the product looks like, what the specifications are, when it's available, pricing, any of those things becomes more challenging. So I think we're all dealing with that as well. I mentioned AI. I think AI is, like our minds are just exploding. What are we going to go do with AI? And our boards want to know, and our employees want to know. And
and that's an absolutely great segue to the whole topic of AI, because I've found over the last year or more that everybody from CIOs just kicking the tires, they may still be working through their master data management strategies, or the data quality and cleanup, or the security and the privacy aspects that have to be around it, depending on their industries. So let's talk about that, about your strategy for artificial intelligence, future plans, how you're educating yourself about it. Because as you say, it's just an exploding mind impact right now. And so how do you approach that?
So I am not a great reader. I read for pleasure, but I get lost in the minutia. I spent a lot of my time learning about AI by talking to people. So I have 5 or 6.
Me too.
Are you? Yeah, I can read about it, but I tend to fall asleep. And I'd much rather have a conversation.
Yep.
So I have 5 or 6 significant business partners, trusted advisors, companies that I absolutely believe in and trust. And they all are larger, much larger than us. An AT&T, an NTT, Data Extreme is one of our customers, SAP. And they all have a chief data officer, or they all have a chief artificial intelligence officer. And so I've been able to get relationships built and have and Gartner, obviously. And I've had conversations with these experts, and that's helped me, kind of learn and help us figure out what to go do. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is Gartner has provided, as they usually do, a really nice model that has 9, I think, different swim lanes and 3 or 4. It's typical 9x3 matrix.
Sure. Yeah.
And what we've done is we've gone through that and chosen elements across those different swim lanes and said, okay, we need to start here. So one of the things we're starting with is a policy. That's one of the things that I've heard over and over. You have to have a policy because your employees, we know that they're using ChatGPT. We know that they're using Copilot. We know that they're using other large language models. Because we can see the traffic, we know where people are actually going. And so we're trying to put a policy in place, first of all, so that we can educate our employees around that. And then I have I think something that's unique that not many other companies do. I'm super surprised by this, but I have a committee that reports to the parent board. And that committee is basically my air cover for things that I want to go do. You were talking earlier about how much easier it is in a family company. Well, I review it with them. I review it with the parent board. Then I go to the presidents and say, hey, here's what we need to go do. And I've checked the boxes with these things. And then they give me the okay to go off and do that. And so I'm bringing experts in to talk to them as well and help educate them so that they can then help me challenge myself on some of my thinking. And then last we have, there's kind of 2 parts that are next. One part is, what do I do about my master data? Because my AI and my large language models and other things we're doing, whether it be RPA or advanced analytics, predictive analytics, are only going to be as good as the data. And so I need the business partners to go make an investment in managing their data. And then we have identified a few, I guess I would call them pilot areas, where we think that there's actual fruitful value in making an investment. And I just want to back up and say one thing, then I'll turn it back over to you. I think I was certainly enamored with AI. It was almost scary. Like AI has never been anything like this before. I've gone through all kinds of technology changes in my career.
Sure.
But AI is different. And I think I've come to learn now that it's really not different. It's just another tool in the toolbox. And really it matters 3 things. What's the business problem or opportunity we're trying to take advantage of? Where's our data? And is this a good solution for us as compared to something else we might go do? And so I'm trying to demystify artificial intelligence because it seems too esoteric. At the HP event I went to last week, they had Antonio Neri in a AI box. It was an image of him, and you could talk to him, and he would respond. It was super cool. We're not going to do anything like that. We're not a $100 billion company, right? We're something somewhat small.
You're not a movie studio. No. I mean, there's some of this stuff that seems mostly entertainment and sales value. But I know what you mean about AI, and I think it reminds me of something we used to call, it'd be back in the 90s, and they called it airplane magazine syndrome, where the CEO of a company would be flying back from maybe California, would have Business Week in front of him, and there'd be like, I don't know what, PC networks or something, I bet, and they'd look at this and they think, oh my God, are we doing this? What are we doing this? And that's the last time I can remember anybody, in the business world feeling like they needed to know more about this. It certainly, I know that all the cloud vendors tried to make, like networks and the internet and data networks more glamorous by calling it cloud, but everybody pretty quickly figured out that it wasn't saving all the money it was promised. It was much more complicated than it was pitched as, and that it was really just somebody else's data center when
That's
you got right down to it. But AI is turning up in our lives. I mean, I'm looking on Facebook through like a garden group, and somebody gets like 200 replies to a question. Now you can open it up and there's an AI summary at the top.
right.
So, and of course it's all over Amazon. And so people are seeing it and experiencing it. And as you mentioned, Chat GPT has become a very big deal. I think you told me that you used it to craft a job offer or a job ad that you were putting.
Yeah. So periodically I'll put some postings on LinkedIn and say, hey, we're looking for PM, or we're looking for this or looking for that. And I'll get a couple of responses, but it's nothing significant. And so one day I wrote one and I said, hey, I'm looking for a business analyst, a program manager, and one other, I think a BI person we're looking for. And at the bottom of LinkedIn, it said, use our large language model. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
To rewrite it. And I hit yes. And I looked at it and was like, oh, it's really good. And I changed a couple of words and posted it. I had 90 notifications the next morning. I've never had that. People actually sent me a personal note, a DM. And I was like, okay, so some of the people were from India. We can remove those because we're on-site company. Some of them were from Pakistan, some of them, whatever. But there were 15 people in the Sacramento area. And
whoa.
And a third of them were in the United States. And so it whatever it did, it got the attention. And so we've been trying to encourage our folks to use the AIs to help us in those large language models to rewrite these things, because they're much better at it than we are.
I've been hearing a lot from CIOs about, especially in terms of pilots and things they're doing internally, it's usually a productivity enhancement or the use of one of the AI offerings from the vendor community that they're using, say, to provide information more quickly to their sales enablement teams or to their call centers.
Sure.
You had mentioned that you're doing some pilots in it right now. Is there anything you can tell us about or brag about?
Well, I don't know. I would brag about it. It's premature, but I think there's three things we're doing. So our project management office is using it to, first of all, capture, because we're on video today. We have recordings of our project reviews.
Yeah.
And they're then having the transcription done by the large language model. We have to go back and do some editing, but all of those action items and other things that people are doing are actually being captured for us, or will be being captured. So that's kind of one area. We've built a bunch of knowledge articles that are help desk uses for people that are calling in related to PC issues or application issues. And we haven't turned it on yet, but we're prepared to do a chatbot, which, chatbots are everywhere, but we're going to try that internally with our folks. It'll be interesting to see how that one works out, because we're such a family-run company. Everybody wants to be around everybody.
Yes.
And then the third one, I think you mentioned, so we're a SAP shop, we do SuccessFactors, which is the human capital management solution. Yep. So they have something called Joule that sits out there, and it is one of those productivity improvements, and it's available to us because we're in the cloud. We haven't told people about it yet. We're trying to figure it out ourselves. This kind of goes back to the whole education thing of, so what can it do? And what's my role in teaching people about it? Or is it the business's role? The HR world in that particular case. And so we're trying to work our way through that. I think that a lot of it has to, if you're going to use a large language model, I think a lot of it has to do with the ability for you to ask a great question. And so should we teach people how to ask great questions, or how to evolve the questions that they're asking? My wife has been using it pretty extensively in her consulting business. And her observation is that she doesn't have to be great at getting the first question right. She has to be great at getting the third question right.
Yeah.
because that then evolves the work that's coming out of the large language model and helping her clarify exactly what she's trying to do.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the CIOs I've spoken with about this recently have also emphasized the importance of like the human element in working with the AI models, like the way, your wife can continually refine and then see that she's getting someplace really good with it.
Right.
That seems to be a big factor. Let me pivot now. I want to talk about the enterprise vendor management that you do. I mean, as you mentioned, you're a company between 1 and 2 billion in revenue, so it's not Intel, it's not $100 billion company. But from our previous discussion, I know that you've got really good partnerships with a lot of the big boys, with SAP and with Microsoft, and even with our sponsor today, Data Extreme. How did that come about? Is this a different kind of relationship you have now with your vendor partners working at a smaller family-owned company versus you come from that world, from HP and Intel? How is that different for you now? And how do you make sure these are partnerships and not just transactional, the sales guy showing up to talk you into upgrading?
Yeah. I don't believe I've ever had an original idea in my entire life. But one of the things I'm really good at is improving other people's ideas. And at Intel, we certainly had a lot of discipline associated with building trusted partnerships. If you think about manufacturing at an Intel or engineering at an HP, you have to depend upon your partners. You can't tell people what to go do. You have to build it together. And so within our environment, we have, like most companies, we have 375-ish total applications. About 20% of our total applications are Microsoft ecosystem, SAP ecosystem. And so the other 80% are the dogs and cats that have come along with acquisitions that we've done over time.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And so I've always believed, first of all, I believe a lot in transparency and making sure I'm being honest with people about where I'm going. It surprises me that I think more IT shops are trying to guard and hold things because they're afraid it's going to work against them in a negotiation. And I think this goes back to kind of the trust thing of being from Michigan. I trust first, and it's yours to lose. But what we've done is give more of our share of wallet to a fewer number of people. So I've got a bunch of 80%, but the large bulk of my total investment on the contract side really goes to 6 to 8 different companies.
Okay.
And so there are 5 that twice a year I have executive business reviews. I have an executive partner that's at least at a VP level in each of these companies. We talk on the phone regularly. I ask them for things like, hey, can you tell me about your chief data officer, your chief artificial intelligence officer, and can we spend some time together? And they open those doors for me where I wouldn't get that opportunity otherwise. And in these reviews, they're not tactical. We're not talking about operational metrics. We're not talking about 99.9 versus 99.95. We're talking about what's our strategy, where are we going, and what services and capabilities do they have that can fill in some of those gaps. Now, it's part of the sales team, so they're going to try and sell. But
of course.
we try not to get into the sales side, and instead use those meetings to really clarify where are we going, what do we need, what do they have, can they fill a gap, and if they can, then bring back those capabilities so we understand them, and then the teams can go through that work and judge solution A versus solution B versus solution C. And so we did that at Intel, we did it at HP, we did it at the bank, we're doing it here. And for me, it's 10 meetings a year that are multiple hours, 4 to 8 hours in each meeting. We travel there once, they travel here once. We have dinner, we break bread, we have a glass of wine or two, and build that relationship so that if there is something wrong, we have a path to fix.
Right. Well, I remember you mentioned that when you first got to the company and you were looking at the new area that you were going to, your new marching orders and the plans that you had for it, that you had one of your subsidiary companies was ready to move to a very industry custom built ERP solution. And
Right.
you had to kind of head that one off at the pass. Talk about that a little bit.
So our distribution business, it's more than half a billion. It's 50 at that time was 45 locations.
Mhm.
And of all of the customers, they were probably the least satisfied with what IT had done for them over the last few years. And they had gotten to the point where they wanted to go to an industry-specific distribution system, ERP,
Mhm.
and away from SAP because they had lost confidence. And so when I was brought in, the first thing that the company asked me to do was help them make a decision about whether we were going to have one ERP or more than one ERP.
Mhm.
And so we created what we called a Peer Plus One group. So
Interesting.
we had president of one of the subsidiaries. He today runs all of them because it's family. One of
Mhm.
the board members, one of the CFOs, and myself be a part of the analysis. And so I spent, along with keeping things running,
Mhm.
uh, did an evaluation of one versus two. And so from a strategy perspective, strategy is about making decisions.
Yeah.
Uh, you can go left, you can go right, you can go center, you can stay where you're at, but you have to make a decision. And so between May of 17 and December of 17, we did that analysis, and our recommendation to the board was to stay in SAP and not have two. And
Mhm.
um, we took the approach of I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm not confused. We're going to have one.
Right.
And so that became the decision point. And then from there on, it was a matter of, so now that we've made a decision on one, how do we provide the capabilities that the distribution team needs in order to be successful?
Mhm.
And that then became pretty easy because we were going to stay on SAP. SAP brought Data Extreme to the mix, and they became the point of sale solution that today is in place and highly successful.
Yeah. Do you find that? I thought that was interesting. I wasn't aware of that angle working with the very big vendors that they would bring forward someone who essentially, like with Data Extreme, they replaced your SAP front end. And I always look at that and I think, well, SAP is so big, they have so much money. Why don't they just fix the front end? But this partnership, I guess when we're talking about vendor partnerships, it's just
Yeah.
as important who they are partnered with.
Yeah, I think a company like SAP, and I think highly of SAP. I
Mhm.
think for those other CIOs, there's probably a love-hate relationship that we have with SAP.
Probably with, well,
Um,
with all of them, with Microsoft, with
yeah,
Oracle. Yeah.
of course,
Mhm.
but they can't do everything, and they have to depend upon the partner network. And whether they
Mhm.
purposely leave holes or whether they think it's not important.
Mm.
And I don't think that the GUI, even though it's been upgraded 3 times, really, is sufficient, which is where kind of Data
Mm.
Extreme filled a hole for us.
Okay.
Um, I think they're doing that in other places as well. I won't get
Yeah.
into a bunch of details,
Right.
but yeah.
We've been talking about a lot of the nitty-gritty work that you do in IT. What is the size and scope of your tech team today? How many people do you need to do all this work?
Sure. So we have 72 full-time employees,
Hmm.
and we're on site. I think we talked about that. We
Yeah.
have a few contractors, 2 to 3.
Okay.
If we do a big software implementation, we may bring an SI in. So when we moved from ECC to S4, we hired a third-party SI to come in and help us do the work. We shared the relationship because we want our folks to learn S4 as well. And then we have this summer, we have 15 interns working for us, and they're kind of spread out across the 3 different organizations. We have a director of project management and business analysis. We have a senior director of operations and cyber, and then we have a director of applications that reports to me, and then my EA and a person that does communications for us.
Well, I'm always so pleased when I hear about intern programs. I mean, a lot of times it's multi-billion dollar insurance companies or healthcare companies, but for
Mhm.
a sizable mid-sized company to have an intern program, I think is terrific. Have you always done that, or is that something more recent?
Something recent. One of the presidents really encouraged me to take a look at interns. He had used that as a program. I think it called a builders program, trying to get people into the building industry. Then they have
Yeah.
a leaders program around that. And he really encouraged me, hey, the cost is minimal,
Right.
and the value is tremendous. And so we started this 2 years ago. We've had 40-ish interns that have come through the door. We allow them to stay 2 periods, so they can be fall, spring, they can be
Mhm.
spring, summer, they can be summer, fall, but
Hmm.
then they need to go because we want to rotate people through. And generally, we've had two kids from high school. They're brilliant, brilliant. I can't say it anymore. Brilliant. And then freshman, sophomore, junior.
Hmm.
Of the kids that we could have hired, there were 8 who were graduating during one of the periods that they were here,
Hmm.
and we've hired 4 of them. So
Great.
pretty good hit rate. And I've had great experience with hiring young people, whether it be new college grads or interns. And
Mhm.
I think what's great about a lot said about this generation, how hard they want to work, and so on and so forth. My experience is that young people don't know the definition of no.
Mhm.
They want to get something
Great.
done. They're
Yeah.
sponges. And so we think it's been super successful. I'm surprised more companies actually don't take advantage of their local communities
Yes.
in hiring people.
Yes, I still remember a story from years ago that I heard at one of our conferences, and it was the CIO of a very big international kind of a construction management company, and they were in somewhere in South America, and they had, it was some big meeting. They were having a lot of problems were happening with ransomware and cyber break-ins, and it was that Anon group, the cybersecurity hacker types,
Mhm.
and they were in a big meeting, and they had one of their interns in there, and he was like a 19-year-old kid on a summer internship, and they were all talking about how to protect themselves from an attack. I think it was a DDoS attack of some sort from Anon, and the kid who was listening to all this said, well, why don't I just go join them? Like, why don't I hang out and find out what they're doing? And at first, the CIO said they were all aghast. They were like, well, no, that's like they're the bad guys. And he was like, well, let me just go infiltrate. And
Sure.
and then they stopped and thought, and they were like, well, that's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do that. And it worked out well. Otherwise, I'm sure she never would have been telling that story at one of our events. But it was
Yeah.
it was a great reminder about just fresh opinions and fresh ideas, probably across all age groups, but not, discounting any any generation and saying, oh, well, millennials are this and boomers are that and Gen X. It's just most of that
Yeah.
is just marketing hooey, I think, that we
Isn't
all
it
tend to buy into.
isn't
Um,
it funny that our first reaction is no instead of yes,
Yeah,
right?
and it should be the first reaction should be, let's think about that. And
Sure.
then those conversations, let's have conversations about it. I think I agree with you there 100%. Now, speaking of which, you mentioned this one or two times when you say we are on site, we're 100% on site. And what you mean by that, I mean, this is rare in this era. Everybody that I would think that most of the people that come and apply for jobs today expect there's going to be flex time and work from home and all those other options, which became so vital during 2020 and 2021, and then sort of faded away. And I think I told you I have a nephew who's been trying to find a company that wants him to come into the office.
Right.
But how does that work for you? And is that any kind of I mean, it seems unusual to me. Do you get that response when you talk with other CIOs where they say, what? You make people come into the office?
I did a reference call yesterday for one of our suppliers, and there were 8 people on the call, and they were all remote. You could tell based upon their backgrounds, like
Yeah.
your office, right?
Right. Hmm.
I'm still shocked that people haven't come back to the office really. So we're a family company. We've been around 72 years. I like to think we love on people. We once a quarter we have an all-employee meeting at our location, and we roll in a barbecue, and the executives all put on aprons, and we serve people. And I think from a servant leadership perspective, it's consistent with that. And so
Yeah.
we have things like, we buy people donuts, and we encourage them to go on walks. And I think we get a higher level of productivity, and just my ability. And Mayor Fan, I've never been in this situation before, right? Because I've always worked for these big multinational companies. I had 1,000 people that worked for me at Intel, and they were all over the world. And if I was going to see them, I had to go somewhere. Well, I can walk out tomorrow. We have an all-employee meeting. I'm going to have 72 people sitting in a room with 15 interns, and we're going to have a chance to talk to them face to face, and they get a chance to ask me questions. And we've been back in the office really since August of 2020. Now we provide a lot of flexibility. Somebody's got a sick dog, they got to take them to the vet, and they're going to work from home in the afternoon. Okay.
Right.
Somebody's got to pick up their kids at 3:00. Okay, they're going to work from home in the afternoon. But people are in the office. Generally, we have a couple people who have medical related issues. They're working from home full time. But the vast majority of the employees are in the office every single day unless they have a work-life balance requirement.
Right. Well, I think, and that has not been an obstacle for you in hiring. I mean, you've got your intern programs, and I think it makes a whole lot of sense that interns would want to be in a work environment.
Oh my gosh, so true. I mean, when we first started this, we lost about 10% of the IT team. People had variety of reasons for it, and since then we've lost maybe another 2 or 3 folks. But I've also hired, like I said, we've hired people, and I'd love to come in the office. Oh my God, you mean I can collaborate with people? I can walk to somebody's desk. I don't have to get on Zoom. I get zoomed out. I'm tired. And instead you can sit and have a conversation on a whiteboard. So
okay, and I want to pivot back at that. Well, good for you, and great luck. As pretty much an extreme extrovert, I've always loved being in the office, and my background is all in newspapers and newsrooms, and when I think about trying to do that all, writing all alone in a room somewhere, it's just sort of, it's depressing. It's not that they're, but of course IT people are overwhelmingly introverts. They're more, I always think of introverts as the more thoughtful human beings, the people who think before they speak versus the extroverts who speak before they think sometimes. So kudos to you. I wish I could send my nephew out there. He lives in Florida, so he probably
send me his resume. Northern California is beautiful.
It really is, and such better weather too. I want to, before we get to our wrap-up point, I want to talk about 2 more things. One is, you mentioned this board that you've worked on. I think you called it your test board, where you've got presidents and ex-CIOs and people from the company, influencers essentially in the company. And I think you also called it a parent board. You use it to test your ideas, to talk to them about AI and everything. I want to hear more about that. Have you ever done this sort of thing before? And it strikes me as a really smart governance move, where you're preparing the people that you need to go and talk to about what you want to do ahead of time. It seems politically very smart too.
So because it's a family-run business, I don't need to go do this. I could just talk to some people and say, hey, here's what we're going to go do. And generally they would agree.
Yeah.
It just became, I think, smarter. Thank you for the acknowledgement. We never did this at Intel, at least as far as I know. We never did it at HP, as far as I know. We didn't do it at the bank for sure.
Yeah.
And the committee is actually, so it's a committee that reports to the parent board. Remember, each of our subsidiaries have their own board, but this is the committee that reports to the parent board. There's a family member on the board who's the leader of the group, Ryan. There's a member of the parent board on the group. There's the COO for the companies. And then I have 3 ex-CIO, CTOs, cybersecurity officers who also are there. And so I use that as a testing ground for, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Does this make sense? We meet 6 times a year. They get paid a small remuneration for their time. We do 3 that are face-to-face and 3 that are on video because they live all over the place. And gosh, it's been so successful, and it's fun, and they're challenging. They ask great questions, and what it does, in addition to providing me with that air cover, is it helps me be prepared when I have to go talk to the presidents about what we're trying to do. It helps me get my story straight.
Yeah, well, I think it's an absolutely great idea, and something that I hope anybody who's listening will take as inspiration to figure out some way to do that maybe in their own company, maybe with their local sim group or something.
Sure.
I just checked to see if we had questions from the audience, and I think you'll find this one very entertaining. It's a question from someone named Paul Menard, and he wants to know. What is Mr. Menard's best piece of advice for young leaders, and who is his favorite son?
Oh, well, he is my favorite son, as he well knows. I think young leaders are all trying to crawl their way up.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people just to be patient, be more open, listen. I was there. I know what he's trying to do in his career, and a lot of young people. I had a one-on-one with the interns yesterday, and he wanted to have a similar kind of thing. But this idea of patience and listening and being curious, I think, is so important as people grow. And what I told the interns yesterday is, you may be the most qualified person for the next job, whatever that job is, and you're not going to get it. And you're not going to get it not because you're not qualified, but you're not going to get it because you don't have the right air cover. So you have to go build that circle of trust where people will say, hey, let's give Paul Menard the chance to, take on that next leadership role because we trust him.
Yeah.
Demonstrated the ability to go do that.
That's pretty awesome advice. And I'm sure that Paul Menard will be very grateful if he hasn't already heard this from Dad. The other thing that we mentioned when I asked you, that as we wrap up with our final question about what you've learned about your own leadership style, and you mentioned becoming more patient right away. You also mentioned curiosity and the importance of listening to each other.
So the patience thing has come over time. As a young dad, I probably wasn't as patient as I am as an older dad. So I am able to listen a little bit more. And to all my people are here, I think the curiosity piece is super important. We tend to judge. No.
Yeah.
Hey, tell me more about that. Tell me more. Open the door. We took all of our leadership team through a workshop based upon a book called Bridge the Gap.
Yes.
And that really solidified for us, who is the person across from you? What is it that they need? And then the third thing I think would be around, there's the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have do unto you. And then there's the platinum rule, do unto others as they wish to be treated. And so not everybody wants to be treated the same way I am. People walk in, I'm like, oh, hey, how was your weekend and what's going on? And I've got a couple of people that are like, we need to get down to our agenda. What's going on here? And so I have to learn how to treat people with the expectation that they have. They'll talk about their weekend later, but they don't want to start with that.
That's right.
So those would be my 3 things that I've learned about myself as a leader now.
Well, those seem like pretty good things. I was interested when you mentioned the Bridge the Gap. I went and looked it up on breakthrough communication tools to transform work relationships from challenging to collaborative. And Inc. magazine called it one of the top 3 business books to read in 2023. So it's very, very recent. And you had a whole program around that with Bridging the Gap, or did you create the program out of the book?
We brought one of the authors in to talk to us about it and teach us things, and we had the leadership team go through it first, and then we had all the employees go through it. So
okay, well, it sounds like you're
using the same language at this point.
It sounds like you've created a real company of communicators there from the IT department on out, which is wonderful.
Thanks, Mary Fran. Oh, I called you Mary Pat. I am so sorry, Mary Fran.
Don't you worry about it. I have been called Mary everything all my life, starting in grade school when the nuns would say, Mary, on your feet. And 8 little girls who were Mary Elaine, Mary Elizabeth, Mary Frances would stand up on their feet. Don't you worry about it at all. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you so much, Marty, for joining me. This was such a fun conversation.
Thank you. I can't believe the hour is over already. You're such a great facilitator and make it so easy to do something like this.
You're not a bad talker yourself. So thank you for bringing all your wit and wisdom to this conversation today. If you joined us late today, don't despair. You can watch the full episode of my conversation here today on LinkedIn, but also on CIO.com and on our YouTube channel. CIO Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And I hope you did enjoy today's conversation with CIO Marty Menard of Pacific Coast Companies as much as I did. Thanks again also to our sponsor for today's episode, Data Extreme. And if you want to be sure not to miss any of our shows, or if you just want to take a wander through some of our previous conversations, do take a moment to subscribe to CIO's YouTube channel, where you can find more than 130 previous episodes of this Leadership Live show, along with several international editions which have spun out of the podcast. And those feature CIOs from all around the world, from Canada, India, New Zealand, and Australia. And I always feel like, what better way to spend your time than listening to CIOs talk? Thank you so much for joining us here today, and we'll see you again next time.